After 25 years of building websites for all kinds of companies in many different industries, Americaneagle.com realized a well-designed website is also your best employee, bringing efficiency, revenue, production, showing up every day, giving above and beyond to increase your bottom line. That's what a website designed, developed, and hosted by Americaneagle.com has brought to so many clients. An Americaneagle.com website is a 24/7 branding exercise, building rapport and thus brand equity while you sleep. Companies like WeatherTech have relied on Americaneagle.com's website design and development and hosting capabilities for years. When some of the world's top brands need a reliable company to prepare their sites for high-traffic events, who do they call? Americaneagle.com. Their clients have come to rely on them for a full line of website services, from consulting and strategy to digital marketing, hosting, and maintenance. Give the team at Americaneagle.com a call today. 1-877-WEB-NOW. The number 1 is the number. Americaneagle.com is the website. 1-877-WEB-NOW-1 is the number.
Famous conservative quotes presented by Automated Systems.
Winston Churchill once remarked, "The best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter." Ponder that for a moment.
Manufacturing companies, I encourage you to call my friend Laz Kulchar from Automated Systems. Automated Systems is a software and systems integration company that specializes in companies that are required to meet FDA compliance requirements. Automated Systems will create a custom solution for your business that will make your production lines, facilities, and plants run more efficiently. Imagine less downtime, more speed, and fewer rejects. From Fortune 500 to startup, ASI delivers solutions for your toughest automation challenges. For information, I encourage you to talk to Laz at Automated Systems. Call 844-HIRE-ASI or visit hireasi.com. That's 844-HIRE-ASI, 844-HIRE-ASI, or online at hireasi.com.
It's open enrollment season, and Medishare is a Christian healthcare sharing ministry that saves most families about $500 a month. Google Medishare and see if it is a fit for you.
8:38, Team Hochberg Traffic Center time, and Jim.
On Chicago's southwest side, there are lane closures still in effect at the intersection of 83rd and Pulaski after a multi-vehicle collision. Looking at a crash in Carroll Stream, Gary Avenue at North Avenue, on Lombard, Finley at Roosevelt. Inbound Kennedy, your delays are from North Avenue to the Burns Circle. It's 24 minutes, O'Hare to downtown, outbound 21. The Eisenhower runs 32 minutes from 390 to downtown. Outbound, it's 38 minutes with delays Harlem to Manheim. There was a crash. Stevenson, 30 minutes, 355 to Lakeshore Drive. Outbound the same. It's heavy approaching the Tri-State. The line is 19 minutes from 95th to downtown. Lakeshore Drive northbound, you'll hit congestion, 18th Drive to Roosevelt. I'm Jim Talamonte on AM 560 The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. Your official Chicagoland weather forecast. From our AM 560 Weather Center, partly sunny, very warm for this time of year, high 72. We may set a record tomorrow of up near 75. It's 57 right now. Next news at 9. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560 The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. Let freedom ring this afternoon at 2 with Sean Hannity on AM 560 The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Rudy Giuliani and Eric Trump in Philadelphia doing a press availability announcing complaints to be filed that have been filed in Pennsylvania, being already litigated, and others that may be forthcoming in Wisconsin and Michigan related to voting irregularities, relating to allegations of procedures associated with vote counting being violated.
And let me also add that this isn't happening just here. We have exactly the same lawsuit in Wisconsin, where exactly the same thing happened. Except in Wisconsin, mysteriously at 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, about 120,000 ballots appeared. Oh, here come these ballots. Well, we have no idea if they really are ballots. We have no idea if they're signed, if they're postmarked properly, if it isn't just the same person who submitted 100,000 ballots, and they all got counted. This is the way they intend to win. Now I'm informed by former Congressman Sweeney, who's been going around the country collecting this information, that similar situation in Arizona, similar situation in Nevada, and a similar situation, what am I missing, John? Where are you? In Michigan, in Detroit, Michigan. Again, let me be specific what it is. This whole new thing that never happened before in our country, these mail-in ballots, which has been a cause of real concern for everyone because they can easily be fraudulent. Well, one of the things that the law attaches to that is the right for both parties to observe the ballot, the way we do with absentee ballots. You make certain it's properly signed. On the outside, there's a signature. You make sure that it's properly postmarked. You make sure that it's properly addressed, and then you pass on it. A number of these are often challenged by the Democrat representative or the Republican representative. We never got a chance to look at a single one of them. The gentleman here who did this for us says about 100,000 ballots went through that process in the 20-plus hours in which they wasted his time by not allowing him to see a single ballot. And we're going to take a very good look at whether we bring this nationally. We certainly are going to bring it here and in Wisconsin. Quite possibly, we'll do a national lawsuit and really expose the corruption of the Democrat Party. But this is beyond anything I've ever seen before. This comes when you think you have so much power and you own the media that you can do anything you want. Well, sorry, we're going to fight for the people. We're going to vindicate their right. And the ultimate result is President Trump has won Pennsylvania.
For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, now the president-elect and CEO of Young America's Foundation. Governor Walker, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. Glad to be with you.
Well, what about what Rudy Giuliani said, both about the 100,000 ballots that showed up from Milwaukee County in the wee hours on Wednesday morning, as well as the assertion that, like in Philadelphia, Trump campaign poll watchers are not being allowed to watch the vote counting to make notes of any absentee ballots that seem that should be thrown out for failure to comply with the rules.
Well, and that last part is absolutely outrageous. That in Pennsylvania, specifically Philadelphia, in Michigan, specifically in Detroit, at a time like this, not just in those jurisdictions, but for the whole country and really for the whole world to see. There should be absolute transparency. Not only observers, but the press and everyone else should be able to. Instead, you've got people putting up plywood to block the view of people trying to look into these locations where they're counting or recounting or seeking to correct what the tallies might be on the ballots. That's absolutely outrageous. I'm still confident. I've said, for a long time, I thought this was going to be close, but I said all throughout election night and the day since then that I felt the president was going to carry Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina. I still think that's true. There was hype about Texas, didn't think that was going to happen. Hype about Ohio, didn't think that was going to happen. Still believe, talking to Governor Ducey, that the president's going to carry Arizona. And then it comes down to the Big Ten, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. I've always felt Pennsylvania was probably the most likely and still think it will be. But in Wisconsin's case, you've got an election after millions of votes cast. It's literally less than 1% of the vote. You're talking about somewhere between 0.6 and 0.7% of the entire vote. And it's worth it to make sure that every vote that was cast legally is counted and that there aren't any votes in that tally that weren't legally cast.
Well, then when can the recount begin of ballots in Wisconsin?
Well, this is what I've told folks. I talked to the vice president, Jared Kushner, and others, that they need to wait for the canvass first. So there's a canvass that has to be conducted. It needs to start no later than next Tuesday. And by state law, every local jurisdiction has to complete a canvass within 14 days of the election. And then those canvasses get sent to the state elections board, which has to do the statewide canvass on December 1st, at which point, if there's no challenges, they can certify the election. I think that's the first big step. Remember, years ago, there's really only been, in modern times, 2 statewide recounts. One was for the presidential race 4 years ago. Jill Stein asked for one. In the end, all that did was a shift of an increase of about 137 votes for President Trump. 9 years ago, in the midst of the protest against me, there was a both a recount and a canvass before that conducted in the statewide Supreme Court election. In that election, that there was a swing of about 300 votes, not a big switch in the recount. But before that, and this is the big part that's important, some in the media have misconstrued my comments on this of not saying that there somehow wasn't hope. There is. The canvass is where you get to highlight whether or not there were errors in tabulating, whether there were irregularities to look into. And the canvass in that election for Supreme Court years ago in Wisconsin actually shifted and added about 14,000 new votes. Why? Because someone had made an error in tabulating for the city of Brookfield. By adding those votes, you went from the challenger winning an election night to, once that was completed, the incumbent, David Prosser, Justice Prosser, winning by thousands of votes in the final tally. That, to me, is the place to look at, is what do you see in the canvas, and does it tighten it from the 21,000 margin now to a smaller margin, which is then a recount makes more sense.
That's interesting. Yeah, no, that's a good point, and explanation is very helpful. Also, this, people forgot, but February of this year, the Wisconsin appellate court ruled in favor of essentially Democrats who did not want to purge the Wisconsin state's voter rolls. 200,000 voters set to be purged from the state's voter rolls will stay registered. That was a reversal of a circuit court order that said the voters were invalid because they had moved recently. And so the problem in Wisconsin, and I understand Wisconsin actually to be one of the worst states here, where you have a disconnect between the number of eligible registered voters and the actual number of registered voters, the number of registered voters being higher than the number of eligible registered voters.
Yeah, and the kicker with that is it's because Wisconsin is one of the few states that has same-day voter registration. So someone could walk in, more often than not, it's a new, younger voter, but it could be of any age. They can come in. And so this is where when people say, how can you have 80, 90, or higher percent turnout in some of these jurisdictions, the reality is a big part of that is because of new voters. Now, having said that, where you've really got skyrocketing numbers, I've suggested that the president's team, his attorneys for the campaign need to come into areas where you see abnormally high turnout that exceeds what the previous number of registered voters was, and actually find out, one, the number of same-day voter registrations, and then two, I would suggest for that legal team, they come and interview, if not everyone, at least a sizable sample of the people who register that day to make sure they're actually residents and legal to vote in that jurisdiction. That would tell you a lot. Because Wisconsin was such a battleground state, you have not only in Democrat areas, you have really high voter turnout in many rural parts across the state that went overwhelmingly for the president. So it could end up being that it was just all this extraordinary attention given to the election for both campaigns that drove up turnout. But it without a doubt is worth looking into to make sure that there's not something going on that shouldn't be.
Yeah, it's just, 83% turnout in Milwaukee County. And in two wards in the city of Milwaukee, voting wards 274 and 273, the turnout was 201 and 202% respectively. That's a lot of same-day voter registration, and then everybody voting on top of it.
Well, and the other thing that's particularly worth looking into more with people checking, again, I'd have the legal team literally sit down and start with a sample and then go out in some of these wards and interview everyone who registered to vote on that day on election day to make sure it's accurate. But you also see the margins going up. Typically, Milwaukee is a big Democrat area. You have in a number of the wards that are predominantly central city wards, you have the margin between the Democrat and the Republican statewide candidates, regardless of office, can be as high as 80-20, 90-10 in a few of these areas of Milwaukee and Madison. But typically it's about, we said in the county it's about 60-40, in the city it's about 65-70. These we're talking 80-90% or higher margins for Biden-Harris. And again, that's not to say that it couldn't happen, but we've seen in other wards actually pretty incredible upticks, and we've seen it nationally, the president's done better than typically Republicans do in terms of votes in the African-American community because of a very concerted effort. And so on one hand, you see this uptick. On the other hand, you see these wards where the percentages are much higher for a Democrat than they had been, even though they're normally high. All those things are things that are warning signs to say, hey, these are areas you need to look into in the same way that I'd want it to be looked into in the suburbs or in rural parts if the numbers were dramatically skewed from what the historical trend is.
And you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation that you spoke with Governor Ducey from Arizona. What exactly did he tell you?
Well, he thought, when I talked to him a couple times in the last day and a half or so, he feels that the votes that were coming in were votes in areas, and the type of votes, particularly votes that would be election day votes, would be more likely to break for the president. We saw that in the first wave. We got another update from the Arizona paper today that validates what the governor is talking about. That trend needs to continue because when I was first talking with him yesterday, I think the margin was about 105,000 votes with close to 600,000 left. They need to break about 60-40 or a little higher than that for the president, but he felt confident they could and they would. And that's key because for that, the whole prediction, at least I and others have made, was the first wave was Florida, Georgia, North Carolina. 2 of those 3 are still outstanding. I still believe they're all 3 going to go with Trump. Then the next wave was to make sure states like Ohio and Texas, which would go for the president. And I included in that Arizona. I was confident talking to Ducey and others that while it was close, Arizona would go for the president. And then it boils down to one of the 3 Big Ten states. And I think they're right, as you just heard Mayor Giuliani talking about, the fight in all 3 of those Big Ten states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. I thought it was going to be close in all of them. And that's probably the biggest takeaway from all of this is how horribly off polling and so many in the national media were. They thought it was going to be a blowout. I've been saying for the last 3.5 years, it's going to be razor thin in Wisconsin, and that's exactly what it is. Yeah. Razor thin in Wisconsin, as usual.
And you know all about razor thin elections in Wisconsin, yeah. Just back to, because I'm not sure we got a comment from you on it, this assertion that's made, and Giuliani made it in his press avail yesterday too, that 100,000 or so votes from Milwaukee County in the wee hours Wednesday morning rather than sort of in the light of day to be processed. And that's an area of concern in terms of perhaps something, significantly unusual going on. Your reaction to that?
Absolutely legitimate to raise that question. Absolutely legitimate to look into this. This is precisely why the canvass is in the law and why it's going to be so important for Wisconsin to do what apparently is not happening, at least in parts of Pennsylvania and Michigan, and that is to have this completely transparent, to have it out in the open. No matter what the outcome, you've got to have a legitimate election, and you've got to be ensured that every vote that was legally cast is counted, and that those that might not be do not get included if they're not legally cast. And that's got to be something that everyone can see in order to have a legitimate election for us to move forward.
And thinking about the support that Trump has in Wisconsin, both in terms of the vote totals, whatever the final number is, as well as the energy based on the rallies that we all witnessed in Wisconsin, among other states, how does the Republican Party in a post-Trump era, whether it's 2 months from now or 4 years from now, how do they continue to capture the imagination of voters like your former voters in Wisconsin the way that Trump has?
Well, you got to talk about freedom. You got to talk not about mechanics of elections, not about mechanics of governing. You got to lay it down crystal clear. The difference that we're fighting for is the difference between freedom versus those who embrace socialism, believing in the individual versus believing in the government. I think that's been part of the president's appeal, was he wasn't a politician. He did what he said he was going to do. We need to make sure that people, and I think that's part of the reason why, to a lesser extent, why I won 3 times in Wisconsin, was we just laid out what we were going to do. We were big and we were bold about it, and we did it. It's why Republicans, no matter what happens in this final canvass and potential recount, Republicans hold strong majorities in both the state assembly and state senate. It's why 5 of the 8 members of Congress are Republican, and why Ron Johnson, our great U.S. Senator, is still in office in Wisconsin, because voters in the Midwest want people who tell us what they're going to do and then go out and do it. Don't talk down to us. Talk to us just like you're sitting at the kitchen table, and then deliver on those promises. Republicans continue, conservatives continue to get elected if they govern like they say they're going to. Democrats only get reelected if they govern not like they said they were going to do, but more like Republicans.
Yeah, you're such a good example, as is somebody who I know you're a protege of, and Mitch Daniels, some of the other names you mentioned,
Sure.
including Ron Johnson. You don't need to be necessarily to try to imitate Trump's personality or have a big, huge personality. And I'm not saying you're not a personable guy, but I'm just saying, it's
nobody has a bigger personality than the president.
Right,
I get it.
Right, but it's the old saying about Daniels, and I think this applies to you and to some others too. The charisma of competence and commitment, of doing what you said you were going to do and doing it effectively. That's another way to go.
Well, because sadly, it's so shocking in American politics that Washington, D.C. is filled with politicians, including some of both parties, who just talk big but don't get anything done. I think people in the middle part of this country, in the Midwest, those heartland of America values, we want people who just tell it like it is and tell us the truth and then go out and do it, which is so refreshing when compared to Washington.
He is former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, and now he is the president-elect and CEO of Young America's Foundation. Governor Walker, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Good to be with you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560.